I mean, you might as well. Yeah. All right. You guys ready to get started? Big gavel. I mean, that's what we do in the legislature. It's a big. Okay. I think I get to conduct this meeting this week. So we're going to bring our meeting to order. Can you guys hear us okay on Zoom? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. So I want to do introductions, and this is for me because I am new to this committee. I had Darren Owens, he actually called me randomly about 20 minutes ago. He says, "How's it going on that committee so far?" I said, "You know, we got a meeting today, and we'll see how it goes." I know we had a brief meeting, not with the full group, a few weeks ago, and I think that was helpful. But let me jump in. And Mike McKell, State Senate. The only thing interesting about me is I race quarter horses and run marathons, and I'm an attorney. I've been in the legislature, my constituents would say, way too long. But I do care about higher ed. I had Representative Ballard's position when I was in the House. I served as the chair. I think the coordination is important, but this is a new assignment for me, and happy to be here. But will you guys introduce yourselves? When I hit 40, I started to lose my eyesight, so I might write some of these down. Introduce yourselves, and we're going to have a good meeting. Then we'll jump right in.
I'm Helen Hanson. I'm with the Department of Workforce Services.
Okay.
Dan Powers, Director of Prison Education for
Okay.
Chris Hodson, I'm a professor in history department at BYU here representing Utah Prison Education Project.
Okay. Cool.
Representative Melissa Ballard, House District 20, and I was so excited to see the new director. He put out a newsletter just a few days ago highlighting so many of the academic achievements. And Andrea, thank you for your work with all the above. And Brian, nice to have you with us. Yeah, I'm just really excited to collaborate and looking forward to even more success. So
You need to take credit. If you were
Yes.
if you were a good legislator, yeah.
I would like to give away credit to my team because
No.
it takes a team. Right?
It does take a team. It does take a team. All right, Jared.
I'll give one right credit to and Brian. So I'm Jared Haynes, representing Commissioner of Higher Education.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm not one. I'm just a guest. My name is Anthony Achell with Salt Lake Community College.
Go. Awesome.
And I invited Dr. Michella to attend. He is nationally recognized for his work in incarceration, specifically with the youth. He has done quite a bit of research and publication and has built up many programs. He's a professor at Salt Lake Community College who teaches for us in the prison, and he has been leading up a reintegration program trying to unify our efforts so that we are more successful in that endeavor, which is why I'm inviting him today.
Perfect. Welcome. We're glad you're here.
My name is David Bockaboy. I am the Director of Prison Education for Salt Lake Community College, and I'm also a chair.
Brian Faber, Department of Corrections Division Programming with Andrea, Education Coordinator.
Hi, Andrea Parrish. I am the Programming Division Director, passionate about education, and allow me to serve and help you guys with any information you need.
Okay. Let's go here as well. I'm new, so I'm making you guys introduce yourselves. That's what you do. But we're gonna go here, and then you're hiding over there. Will you step to us who you are? Let's actually go back here. Who do we have?
My name is Russ Galt. I work here at the Commissioner's Office. I work primarily with technical colleges. And since a lot of the prison education is done through the technical colleges, I'm sitting in here to learn what you're doing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Me too. Okay.
Sheriff Jensen with Cache County, but also representing the Utah Sheriff's Association.
Cool. Welcome.
I'm Chris Bradbury, Coordinator of Prison Education for Salt Lake Community College.
Okay. Over the top over here.
Yeah.
With you, she.
And occasionally you can't get away with it.
Oh, I would love to get away with
Hi, I'm Anna Tricia Gibson. I'm subbing in for admin support today. So you might not see me all the time, but I'm here usually. So welcome. And if you need anything, please let me know.
Okay.
She has her ticket out of the garage.
And I'm not gonna make everybody online introduce yourselves. We've got names, and I'm gonna Google you as we look at this for those that I don't know. We've got some people who are excused. I've got Roxanne Molina, new job. I showed last meeting for a few folks. Last meeting for Rich Christensen, Grace Acosta. The Board of Higher Education obviously has shifted. That's something that we just did by consent and Senate just last week. Let's start with you, Jared. Let's get the update on our council reappointments as well.
So as mentioned, we'll be losing our two Board of Higher Education members, so we'll be Council 11, instead of 13. All of the reappointments are, for the most part, underway and in progress. Some of you may have heard from your appointing authorities. We're still holding on to governor's appointments. Chris, we need some candidates for former students. And so we're going to, some of you know former incarcerated students. Send us some names, maybe contact them first and let them know about this council, that the governor needs to appoint someone. We're just trying to find people who would be available, interested, and qualified to do that kind of thing. So if you could do that in the next couple of days, that would be wonderful. Let me know who they are after you contacted them. And hopefully by the end of the week, we can send some names to the governor's office for those appointments. That's the update on appointments.
Okay, item number 2, we're going to approve the minutes. Thank you, Representative Ballard, for the motion to approve the minutes. Is there a discussion of that motion? I can use basic rules, right, today? We're good with that.
Robert's on the
Well, I'm not gonna take a second. We're gonna stick with Mason. In the discussion, I'll move with that passage unanimously. Thank you for that motion. Inmate population profile, Department of Corrections. Let's go to you and run through this. And my notes don't say who's going to present that. So
somebody from corrections.
We're gonna tag team that because we really struggle to kind of get at this data. There's a lot of requirements in statute, and we're trying to make a best effort to report the data accurately. And also, I just want to start by saying that after seeing some of the results, we're not necessarily buying that the data is accurate. And I think there is, we want to be transparent and share what we have and what's in our system. I also want to put a healthy dose of caveat in that our OTRAC system isn't it's as good as the data that gets entered, and I don't know that it's always very reliable. We also have redefined our recidivism recently to be more in alignment with other states and best practice, which is a gold standard of a 3-year review post-release, and then to see if they come back into our system. And that's only for individuals who have committed a new crime or have a new conviction. We used to measure differently. We still measure it in all the ways, but we just wanted to be able to better compare ourselves with other states. And just big picture, what I want to say is this. I think what we have done is reach a capacity where all of our space, all of our educational seats are largely filled right now. The data suggests that 11.6% of the population at a point in time is participating in education. That means we have just over 10% or roughly less than 12% who are able to participate in education at a point in time. It's important to recognize that's point in time data. So as they graduate, new seats get opened up, they are able to fill those seats. So it's not as though only 10% get an opportunity to educate. It's just that at any given time, that's kind of our capacity limitation. And I think what we've done our best to do in the last several years that we worked together is just really focus on adding new programs and new opportunities, eliminating barriers to access to education, making sure that we're committed to our community partnerships and doing a good job with educating our population and also our jail partners and expanding opportunities that way. And so those are kind of our deep commitments at the moment. Happy to let you pick up.
And I will probably
put some of our education partners on the spot as well, but one of the things we wanted to highlight for this last year was specifically with Salt Lake Community College, and you guys are here, but Davis Technical College as well, is the expansion of the programs that we've added. Just as in the last year, for Salt Lake Community College, enrollment expansion, and for Davis Technical College, program expansion of adding specific programs. David or Chris, I don't know if off the top of your heads you know exactly, I can find the exact number, but going back a year, the expansion of the enrollment from then until now. I think Chris, you and I had this conversation. It was, just off the top of your head, what would you say, like kind of the enrollment differentiation?
Enrollment's basically doubled, and we're looking at it potentially another doubling in the next year,
which we're very excited about. And Davis Technical College as well. We're on the cusp of starting 3 brand new women's programs at our Salt Lake facility, and expanding men's programs as well. So without actual numbers of seats, but just knowing that the programs themselves are expanding.
I ask a question on that.
Absolutely.
It's not like I'm brand new to this committee. If the programs are doubling, what's the demand like? Is the demand more, obviously there's the demand for it, but how is that meeting the demand today?
We should actually be perhaps even more specific and state that when we began the fall semester in the new prison at Salt Lake Community College, with the help of corrections, we admitted 226 students that fall semester. And that was when the prison just opened up. And we are all aware of the challenges that the Department of Corrections faced moving into a new facility. So there were 2,500 men and women incarcerated there at the time. So to me, that was an incredible task to go forward in the midst of all of those challenges and to admit 10% of the population there at the time. We had a 93% completion rate for the women that semester. It was about 66 for the men, and the problem with that, the reason that it wasn't higher is because of challenges with movements, as we've discussed. Movements where they were not able to complete, and there was one death. So we had tremendous success that opening semester, and as Dr. Bradbury suggested, what we anticipate, we think that we will have 300 active students taking classes this fall in the prison. So, and that's face to face. So that's a tremendous undertaking, but we are very excited about it. We're going to have our first graduation ceremony there on July 10th. We have graduates that will be celebrating there anyway. And one thing I would emphasize too, going back to what Andrea mentioned regarding how difficult it is to assess numbers sometimes. I don't think we should ever overlook the fact that these numbers that we look at are going to be connected with the COVID pandemic. And we cannot underestimate how difficult that was for the incarcerated population, for education, for programming, and also when they left. I can name a couple of individuals who left during the pandemic and everything was closed down. They'd never used a computer before, and of course they ended right back up in prison. So, yeah, we have faced some significant challenges over the past couple of years, and we have a lot of growth that needs to happen so that more barriers are taken down. But I am very excited, and I do not think that we should trivialize the success because it is tremendous.
And Senator McKell, to answer your bigger question, absolutely the demand for and desire to have an education while incarcerated is huge. And by no means are we meeting that demand. I think that the job for us is to always look for opportunities to expand our educational seats. We, despite having a brand new prison, we're still challenged to have enough classroom space to facilitate all the need in our new facility. And then, you know, our prison is divided in, we have 2 main prisons and then we contract with 20 county jails. So it's a lot of, there's a huge deliberate effort to coordinate all of these systems and make sure they work cooperatively and support each other. And that there's also that piece of making sure that when we move somebody, that they're in a place where they can complete their educations, right? And we're working closely with the Division of Prison Operations to help all be on the same page, that let's make sure that every placement is a deliberate one that impacts the population we serve positively and helps reduce that recidivism rate. So I just want to complicate your worldview a little before we get into the details.
No, and I appreciate that. What is completion? How do you measure completion? Is that a certificate of some
Yes.
sort? Okay. I mean,
It depends on the program. So for a technical college, it would be a certificate. Or Salt Lake Community College.
and I know I'm asking you guys basic questions.
No, you should.
Because it's my first day.
Well, we look at completion rates per class for student as well. We want to know this. That's why I was able to cite those. How many are completing the class that semester? That matters to us. But in terms of completion, we offer academic certificates. And then we have associate's degrees, both associates of arts now and associates of science available.
So 93% completion on the women is 93% who took a class, completed it.
And completed it that semester is what
We don't know how many went on for degrees or certificates.
Sorry.
Do we know how many went on to degrees or certificates?
From that specific semester or?
Place.
So when you hold your graduation on the 10th, how many associate
graduations.
degrees will you award?
What is our number up to now? Is it?
So there's
29?
31 degrees and certificates being awarded. So, and that's despite the COVID pandemic and all the disruption that caused.
This isn't one of those things like a typical graduation where 10 or 20 or 30% of the students will actually attend the graduation.
So,
right, you get them all there.
This is who's completed. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Jared?
So I think one of the next steps, and we're already starting to work on this, is pulling together our education folks and saying, okay, what's the best plan for what we look forward to in higher education for the incarcerated individuals? What are the right programs, the right mix of programs? How do we deploy them in a way that's effective for them? And so to do that, I wonder if some of the data you turned in has some demographics and indicators of behavioral issues and so on. But I wonder if you have some sense that we can think about as we go down that pathway of designing pathways of what is the right mix and what are the individuals they're ready to receive in terms of higher education. We obviously have 200 that, I don't know if they have to qualify to take these classes or they just sign up, or how does that go?
For our classes, we operate on open enrollment as a college, but that means that they must have at least a high school equivalent. They also need to have an ability to be able to access the classes that are being offered, which means that their privilege level must be in accordance for them to go to class. So but there are opportunities eventually to expand without question, especially as we take advantage of the tablets. Right now, the tablets have successfully broadcasted LDS religious services on Sunday from the chapel into maximum security. And so men in maximum security have been able to join in through the tablet system and participate in some religious activities, which has been a tremendous benefit to them in a place that is very difficult to be. It is our hope then that now that we'll be able to, as educators, take that and use that and eventually have some students that are in maximum security, and we could broadcast from the class in general population into those that qualified. There's been quite a bit of interest expressed on that on the part of those who are involved in programming in maximum security.
So I mean, if you had 200 sign up for classes last year, you're looking at 300
coming
fall.
physically, and then the tablet.
If we're doing everything that we could be doing there and had unlimited resources and facilities and so on. That's, I guess, what are we building toward? And what's the right mix? Do we do general ed classes and associate degrees? Do we do technical certificates? Is there some combination now? So that's what we'll be working on.
Well, I was just gonna say, here's another new person question. Obviously, it's like, I'm always amazed at what you guys are doing community-wide. This doesn't surprise me that you're doing good things. But I've got Davis Technical College here. I've got 16 institutions. How many other institutions are engaged in the system that are doing this? So BYU.
Yeah, so I'm a faculty member of BYU, but I volunteer as instructor at the Prison for the Utah Prison Education Project, which is run, Andy Eisen runs it, and it's run out of the University of Utah. And so we teach university level classes in a number of different facilities at the prison. I've been doing that for about 3 years, just got done this past semester with the upper division history class in the women's facility. And
what was your class? What was your actual class?
So I've taught a few classes at the prison. I taught a version of the U.S. History Survey to Civil War and Reconstruction this semester. And in one of the men's facilities at the old prison, I taught that course, and then I also taught students request actually an upper division course on the French Revolution, which is a research specialty of mine. And Andy can speak to this really with a lot more detail than I can. But the vision that UPEP has is, and this goes back to something I mentioned in a previous meeting, which is, I think in general, in prison education, the best practice is that to the extent possible, higher education on the inside should resemble higher education on the outside. That is the full complement of possibilities and opportunities and so on for the students. And so the vision we have is for a bachelor's program inside the prison, which UPEP hopes to begin potentially in winter semester 2024. And just as a note, I've taught dozens of students and so on, both men and women, in a couple of different facilities inside the prison. And the quality and capacity is there. I mean, these guys can attest to that as well. There's no reason that someone in the state prison shouldn't have the opportunity to come out with a proper bachelor's degree that can lead to a lot more opportunity for jobs, but also that is kind of intellectually enriching, civically engaging, and so on while they're incarcerated. So that's what we hope to wind up doing.
So how many of our institutions statewide are involved today?
I'll give you a rundown. So we have Davis Tech doing technical education in Salt Lake. We have Snow College, Mike, raise your hand if you're out there, in Gunnison doing technical education. We have Uinta Basin, Mark, if you want to raise your hand there, doing technical education at Duchesne County Jail. And then on the degree grading side, we have Slick doing general education certificates, and I think you're trying to roll out some other associate's degrees as well.
We actually have 6 associate's degrees now.
Okay, good.
And just to answer that specific question, we are operating now as a second chance Pell institution, and our status will continue for another 3 years. And so with that, we cannot expand our program into other facilities or even adopt other degrees, not until we officially qualify with the department that is a prison education program. But as Dr. Bradbury mentioned, we're set with 6 associate's degree potentials.
And then, as Chris mentioned, we have the Utah Prison Education Project that Andy is the director of, that is working with BYU, University of Utah, bringing in courses as you can at this point. I don't know that you have full degree programs, but that's kind of what you're working on.
And I want to add that we just met with Utah State University to partner with our greenhouse program, which we want to expand and offer more certificates through as well. So we're going to get all the universities on board eventually. That's the goal.
So I'll give you, if I could,
No, I'm gonna go hijack the meeting.
No, it's
Keep
good.
on trying this.
this is good. I'm going to give my broad goal and perspective right now. And Sheriff, thank you for being here, because I think the opportunities that are going on in individual jails and at the state's 2 facilities. For me, the biggest question is, we have to align the articulation for the cost, for the completion, for the workforce development needs. We need to help consider of the inmate where they are exiting, and because the workforce needs may change. We want to help them to establish careers before they leave as much as possible. And so I am always a believer of don't reinvent the wheel. Let's develop and coordinate the wheel. And so I think about 2 months ago, we put out some emails to those of you who are doing the education right now, because I would like to be able to offer for the sheriffs as well. From USHE, we have the following classes available. These are in person at these facilities. These can be Zoomed, Skyped in, however you're going to do that class. But I think most importantly, when an inmate, especially state inmates, they're in longer than the jails. They are of the state, even though they contract with the jail. And so my legislation last year, we'll be talking about it later, but one of the things that we need to have is when they arrive, they have their case action plan, but they also have an academic advisor to say, where can we help you help your trajectory? And then they can help them, because Senator McCall, it's been in the past that the inmates have had to pay 50% up front, and we need to eliminate that, give them resident status and so forth, apply for scholarships, apply for Pell Grants, all those things. And so my goal, I think right now, is the #1 priority is this articulation. From what I've looked at with those that are incarcerated, and correct me to if I'm wrong, most that are eligible of after post-secondary education, there's maybe only, I don't know, maybe 2%, 5% that are eligible for a master's or another bachelor's. Is that correct? Or what's the percent, or what do you think? What's the percent for more than technical college or community college? How many are eligible for, and I say eligible, if somebody comes in and already has a master's or a bachelor's, they may have to change their employment and get a different education to be employable again, right? So I'm counting all of those. Or if while they're incarcerated, if they want to pursue more education, we'd rather have them busy and better in their minds. So do you have any idea what that percentage is that is really eligible for and ready for a bachelor's or a master's?
Here's what I do know.
Yeah.
We pulled some data just to look at how many people had completed a high school education or equivalent. It's roughly half the population. However, as you will notice, a lot of those people aren't truly ready for a higher education certificate or degree because they have no mastery of like numeracy and literacy. So we've had to implement some programs in partnership with the LDS faith leaders to they volunteered their time and their resources to help us get a basic literacy program enacted and working. So you can see it's complicated, right? That we have the whole spectrum of needs from, we do have some highly educated individuals who are incarcerated and still need to stay engaged in bettering themselves. And we also have people the other end, that non-native English speakers that have very limited literacy abilities. So we have to sort of work to serve the entire population. I would also add that just because they have received a high school diploma, it doesn't mean they're eligible, right? There's some other factors that go into whether they're going to be housed in the right place, whether they have, if they can self-remove from a program, either through their behavior or through something that they've done, or they can elect to not have an education at all, right? We don't force people into programming opportunities, we just provide them. I think that's important to recognize.
To your point, like a UVU has a lot of students that open enrollment, but they have to start with a lot of remedial courses, and it's a large percentage. But I mean, as I've been told about this committee, one of my goals helping here as we look at legislation, President Ballard talks about recommendations. I mean, I guess our goal will be to help remove as many barriers as possible, and that's up to this group, right? I mean, that's why we're here to coordinate. Let's keep moving forward in our agenda, because I think this is a good discussion, but let's bring on Sheriff Hanson. Let's talk about county jails, because I think your situation is a little unique, and I want to understand that a little bit more as well. So let's give you some time, and then I know we've got some folks on the line. Jared's got my notes, maybe have some things to say. But let's go to county needs, barriers, recommendations. And obviously, your situation is unique.
Well, thank you first for giving us some time to speak. And just to start off, we want to be great partners with the Department of Corrections. And really, these programs are built for state inmates. County inmates aren't in jail long enough to really get them started on any type of program. But we have been great partners with the state in contracting for many years. So we do want to remain to be great partners with the state. And whatever this group can figure out for the educational pieces with corrections, sheriffs are more than happy to be part of that process. So right now, there's about 1,600 inmates that are currently housed in 20 jails across the state. There are 20 jails who contract with the Department of Corrections currently. So 1,600 inmates. But in the past, what's happened with programming with inmates is, with state inmates, is corrections, they figure the programs that they need for their state inmates, and they work independently with sheriffs across the state who can and able and willing to provide certain programs to state inmates, and that's how housing is kind of divvied across the state. So there's, across the state right now, there's four intensive therapeutic drug treatment programs. There's 3 therapeutic sex offender treatment programs. All 20 jails who contract have some sort of cognitive type program within our jails with the state inmates. Most jails offer a GED program to the inmates, whether they're county or state inmates. The GED classes, Thinking for a Change, MRT, there's a whole list of what cognitive trainings there are. I know some of the jails, Starkville County being one of them, and there's more, that they do some trade work. They do screen printing and some different things with state inmates as far as trades go. One thing that jails do have, and I don't know where it is with the state prison, but most of the jails do have tablets available in the jails to the inmates. Working with several different vendors across the state, I think all of us, 4 or 5 vendors available for tablets, and all of us kind of do different things.
And if I may, I think the model would be for the jails to keep your own contracts, even if they are state inmates, so that we're not giving you tablets that have different systems than what they're working on. But if they can communicate,
sure,
that's what we want to make sure that they are doing, so that the programming is continuous.
Yeah, that's great. And the tablets, the contracts available across the state with at least the 6 or 7 vendors that are being used, is there's no cost to the counties for the tablets. An inmate can get a tablet. In my case, it's $6 a month. They can get a tablet for the premium thing, and that gets them movies and music and all kinds of stuff. The inmates who don't sign up for the package, we have tablets available to them at no cost that they can do visiting and emails and phone calls and all that stuff to their families. And I think all the plans are pretty much the same between all the vendors that are being used across the state. But most of the bigger jails do have tablets available to the inmates. Now, whether they can be, how they work with adding different programs to them, how they communicate, I think that would be something we would have to, all of us would have to look at down the road if that was an option.
And I would also, if I may, I'd really like for there to be some collaboration on various contracts or whatever, because I know that the prison asked us this last year for like $4 million and $3 million ongoing and for the tablets. And so if there's a $6 a month fee that can provide, I just think it would be really good to look at a lot of those contracts and see what we want the competition with the different industries, but we want them to communicate and we want to have affordable and just save the state dollars as well.
Well, I would be happy to get, I'd be happy to get the different contracts, the different vendors and bring back to this group that we could look at. What I don't know is the compatibility of them and how much they can be enhanced to be able to do the educational pieces of it. And if there's, what cost there would be to do that. But they are available in most of the bigger jails in the state right now.
Educate me just a little bit. What's your typical length of stay in the jail system? I know it's not long.
For the county inmates?
Yeah, county inmates.
We talked today, probably 35 to 45 days. There's some that might stay a year, but most of them are really sentenced inmates that have their 30 to 45 days.
How do you guys work around that? You guys sell like community college, Davis. How do you work?
But those aren't
around that?
state inmates, they want to know.
Counties.
The state inmates can stay as long as the program
Just look at my Utah County Jail. I drive by there when I go to the vet over and over, and I've got this big, beautiful garden. These guys are out working it. I don't know who mentioned Utah State, but the fact that you can have a Utah State education program with those gardens, it's pretty cool idea.
We have a greenhouse program at my jail in Utah State. Their educational piece comes down and trains the inmates on horticulture. And they grow vegetables and they grow flowers, and they use the flowers to enhance all the county buildings and the old county courthouse. So we're already doing a little bit of that.
You're not Utah County, what you gotta have they have a horticultural program?
Yeah, I'm in the history department, so I don't have a ton of information about the OU culture. But I will say, there is an argument to me. I'm actually a Cache County guy, I'm a Utah State guy.
Well,
1,000 apologies, but
all against it.
right, but there's an argument to be made, and I see Sam Arundwa online. I know he's done some of this work at USC Landing, that the county jail system, that might be a job for Utah State University, which of course is a land-grant university, which has all of the branches that like statewide. So recognizing, of course, that adding another partner adds a bunch of complexity and so on and so forth, and there are limitations on the basis of people's length of stay and so on as to what programs can be offered. But there's a strong argument to be made that Utah State is a good partner for the jail system.
I want to hear from Sam. Sam, my notes say that you did a pretty cool program at San Juan County Jail. Will you tell me about it?
Yes, I can tell you about it all day, but let me see if I can do 1 minute version.
How about a 5-minute version?
Oh,
You can have longer.
you are generous. Thank you. So it's a pilot that we did last year to test whether a university, in this case, Utah State, can provide higher education in prison using what we are calling surplus resources. Because we realize this has been nothing against Utah. You find it across the country that there are issues with legislatures allocating money. And the attitude from the county is to do nothing until money is allocated. So you have that sort of pause. And in this case, a 30-year pause in higher education. So my team and I were testing whether we can use the resources we have to offer higher education without any additional funding from legislatures. And the outcome was surprisingly yes. My wife and I and 5 other professors at USU volunteered to teach a class for free. So I taught the first 2 classes, and there is opportunity for us to deploy additional professors if we can. So that's the reason I wrote it a report and forwarded it to Representative Ballard and the council, that while we're waiting for what I'm calling the premium version, which is where the legislature or the state government allocates money, we don't need to do nothing. There are resources in every county, in every university, that those of us who are interested can put together and offer what I think is a respectable version of higher education while we are waiting for funding from whoever. So that's in a nutshell what that was about. I'm excited about it. I have dedicated summer to replicate that pilot in the other jails across the state. So I visited with about a dozen sheriffs in their jail, and I'm committed to visiting all of them to sort of bring the good news that there are professors in their county who will say yes if we ask them to volunteer and teach for free. In addition to the professors, the magical thing is when I said yes, about 100 of my students volunteered to help me. So that's additional resources that is invisible until a professor volunteers, and then others would come along. And that's what that's why I'm interested in working with this committee or council if there is interest in that type of thinking, which is radical or outside the box, but it does allow us to maintain a steady, robust access, 100% access to higher education for every inmate without having to do nothing and wait for funding. I should mention, since you gave me 5 minutes, one of the former legislature now who worked on this, Representative Lowry Snow, I was attending his sort of ceremony and he introduced me to the governor and his wife. And I whispered this in his ear and he seemed interested. So I think with the elected officials that I've spoken to, I apologize, I haven't met with you one-on-one, but I've met with Representative Ballard Snow, who was before that. Those that I have been able to talk to, they are very interested because our pilot solves what I think is the pain point, which is how to secure money from legislature. I am a big proponent that taxpayers should fund this project. I say that as a citizen, I say that as an expert, but I will also qualify that by saying that we don't have to do nothing if the legislature is not willing to. We have the ability to mobilize individuals, experts, professors, professionals in each county who are willing to start offering higher education. What we know from the science is clear. Any type of higher education is better than nothing. So it doesn't have to be an accredited program, although that is the gold standard. But even the teaching that is done one inmate to another or volunteer professor to inmates is way better than doing nothing. So that knowledge we have should, I believe, should invite us to act on this while we are waiting for additional funding. I think we should start offering higher education in every prison. So the number that I'm committed to is 100%. We should not pick and choose who gets higher education. The science is clear. We should make this available to everyone. There are different models. There's what we call self-paced courses that requires absolutely no internet. And then there are other versions, face-to-face, hybrid. I should mention that I am currently working with Utah Tech to offer higher education classes in all of the juvenile prisons. So I teach from one location and it's broadcast by Zoom to all the juvenile prisons in Utah. I'm doing it for over a year. So we know we have the resources. The will is there, at least 6. Individually, I think the time is right for us to move forward. As we look for more money, we should continue to offer what we can. And that happens to be one of my skill sets, and that's why I'm here. Be happy to collaborate with you to make it happen.
Hey, perfect, Sam. And one of our agenda items, I don't think we're entirely ready to have this. I got an email from Jared earlier that as far as having a full budget recommendation, she still needs to meet before we do that. But I think you bring up a good point. I tend to agree with you that it's something the legislature should be funding. I'd be curious. I know we're going to have a budget discussion. I'd be curious to see what that looks like when we do that. And I'll let you talk about that in a minute. But just going back to the jails, as a group, I think it'd be helpful just to have a discussion. What is the goal with jails? What is the recommendation? Where do we go? I think it's clear that it's different. It's harder, but you do have folks that are in there longer term. I mean, where do we want to go with where do we want to go with jails, and how do we collectively do that together? And I'm gonna throw that out just as a question for the group, and feel free to chime in, because that's the question. Let's collaborate on that part. Where do we go with the jails? How do we help from, push forward some good education there as well? How do we be partners?
If I just got a couple more things with that, and I've met with Sam quite a few times, but I know he's working some jails, and this program he's got is fantastic because it's free and they're volunteering their time to do that. But also from USU on my side, if I've got USU Extension who has come to my jail and they want to offer educational programs to the inmates in our jail that they will be able to do for free. And we haven't really got too far, but I know other universities across the state, if there's jails in those communities, that are also offering different things to different jails. So I think getting all the things in one place to see what's being offered across the state, so it's not every university or every tech school is not just out cherry picking, which is okay. I think it works great. I'm doing the same thing. We just built an animal impound facility in my office, and VTech students are coming down. Or VTech is coming over and they're using our impound facility as their vet tech program. We can certainly do things with state inmates to get vet tech training, but I think there's a lot of things going on in the state and none of it's very well organized.
Jared, can I ask a question? I've gone through some of these materials, but is there a way I can get almost, I don't want to call it a menu, but something like that gives me kind of a list of who's doing what and where? I think
from the sheriffs.
Not just from the sheriffs, but across the state, and maybe it's all here.
We do have that in our report that we did last year. Of course, we need to update that. What we don't have in there, what we have in there is our really academic programs. So our technical education certificates, our general education courses, and certificates and associate degrees. We don't have in there a good indicator because it's kind of going on independently of one-off courses. Are we teaching history? Are we teaching some of the classes that Sam talks about where any education is better than none? I don't have a good handle on that. Maybe you do. Maybe we can pull that together.
I would say for purposes of the legislature, and I can't speak for Representative Ballard, but for me, when I look at funding, if there's a way to bring it all together and create a collaborative package, I know we're gonna have a more lengthy budget discussion in our next meeting, but it sure makes our job on the Hill a lot easier. There's nothing more frustrating for me. When I was chair of higher ed, everybody had their brilliant program that they tried to bring, and there was no gatekeeper to make sure it was a good program. And it's always frustrating to see it. To me, and I think that, obviously that's why we have this group. So I don't want to say gatekeepers. We're not there to keep stuff out. If there's good stuff, it needs to come in. But it makes our job as legislators a lot easier.
I think one of the things we talked about as far as funding and where it would come from and how we would do that, we do have a lot of individual institutions that can have it as their separate line item budget, but I think USHE should request all of those line item budgets and house it so that you can continue the articulation. I think education, some is better than none, but I want it to be productive. I want them for completion. I want, as you're talking about all these different institutions, that's why we cannot offer every single degree that all the universities have. There's only going to be a few that need an exception for a particular degree that they could probably zoom in or download some particular classes, but the rest of them should be really, whether they're in a county jail and then get transferred, that there's a streamline of what is your end goal. And I think that's why those the student access advisors are really important, because when somebody is incarcerated, if they don't meet with an education access advisor immediately after their case action plan, it's really hard to change your mind of why you're even in corrections. You're gonna go through all the programming of trying to change your behavior, and you're like, but I'm going back on the street. So what did you want me to do? I don't know how to live any differently. And it's the hope of the education and the change, an opportunity for a career that gives them hope and an interest for that. So it also goes, as you're talking about collaborating contracts for the tablets, I think it's also looking at, and I did mention this to Director Red, looking at programming. Because as the state inmates get transferred from your facility to that jail, and then this jail, and then that jail, and then back here, they have to start programming all over again, every single time they get moved. And so whatever can be done, whether it's for the education, as well as for the behavioral health or the sex or the drug treatment, they're to have some kind of an articulation of programming that the tablets could help monitor and so forth. I think that's going to make a big difference because there's a lot of frustration from the inmates of being transferred 5 times in 5 years, right? And having to start everything all over again. So I think that's one of the things that this group is to really, when you look at the offerings, right? Last year we talked about this group being able to give to the county jails. Here's what we can offer as a system. Here are the things that we would love for you with your collaboration with your institution. Can you find a class equivalent to, or a lab equivalent to, so that they're not just whatever happens to be available, but it's all towards the completion, it's all towards the specific certification or towards the specific degree, so that it has a purpose, so that they really, again, as they're coming into corrections, they have some kind of vision of what I want to do when I get out. It was one of the inmates, and then I'll end with this, but one of the inmates said, I was determined I was going to be a better father when I got out of prison. And then I took one of the classes, I think it was one of your classes, and his response was, I realized I need to start being a better father right now. And so that's what I hope that articulating, making it easier for your jails, easier for the local institutions, that this alignment of what's available and what I was mentioning with the bachelor's or the master's, there's going to be an exception, right, of who needs a master's or who wants a separate bachelor's degree that's not one of the offerings. That could be an exception that could be, if they could apply for, that the higher institutions could help facilitate some of those online classes to be downloaded and upload their assignments if it was an exception. But there should be some, and that's why I want to look at what those degrees are. If USU and the U and BYU are all looking at classes for a degree, I want to know what those degrees are, because I think communication is not going to give them the right job when they get out. What will be the right degrees when they get out? That's what I think this articulation needs to be.
I think the Department of Corrections has done a lot better job because they're really focused on programming now for specific offenses. And I think certainly the education piece could be part of the decision-making on where the inmates get sent from the state corrections.
It's in state law from HB 194. They're supposed to consider what programming they're currently in, including education, before transferring them. So I think there's a lot of work right now to reevaluate that scheduling. That's just been a challenge.
I think that, that would be our only concern, is we don't want to give up all the programming if you're a sex offender or a drug addict for just the education piece of it. But I think if they could both be done together, the sheriffs we're on board with the Department of Corrections. We'll make whatever work, whatever we comes out of this group, we will make work.
And I would say to you, I've been doing this 11 years as a legislator, and I think sometimes the legislature, we get overly prescriptive, and I don't think that's the intention. And I think we can find ways. I think it'd be good. I'm actually glad the more I've gone through this committee and learned about it, I'm glad I'm here, because I think sometimes we get overly prescriptive, and I think that we can find a way, to really do some good and work there, especially where you've got that relationship right now. And I think it's good to have this Council, Jared, you're gonna say
Yeah.
something.
So back to pathways and what's the best mix of course, and how do we get out of county jails? Like I said, I think we've got a good start with our group of educators here, and we welcome any other educators that want to hop on that. Our last discussion was really around what do we look at when we're thinking about someone who even has a high school education? Okay, what do we do with that? Who goes into a certificate? What kind of certificate? Technical education. Who goes into an associate degree? Who takes general education? Who works on bachelor's degrees and that sort of thing? One of the things that we're going to have to try to figure out going to the county jail question is we have pockets of state inmate populations. I think I looked through the jail book, and I think the largest one is maybe 200, 300 state inmates at one county jail. Some of them have 0, and you have anywhere from 80 and 100, 200 at some of them. Out of those 200, out of those 300, how many of them are ready for higher education? We have Duchesne County Jail Market has their building construction program. You've been doing there for years. I think you do about 30 inmates a year. You're looking at potentially a couple of additional programs there. I don't know how many inmates is the potential there, but do we have building construction at Duchesne County Jail and Cache County and Garfield County, or do we have one jail where all the building construction people go, another one where people who are going to do, I don't know, culinary arts or something like that? Like, what's the best way to deploy that? And how do you get the right students in the right place? And is that even a factor that can be considered?
I'd like to speak to that. I think that there's maybe 2 possible approaches to this, and I don't think they're mutually exclusive. So one approach is that we leverage our technology. We use our tablets where people can engage in classrooms across the state simultaneously, right? Regardless of their location. So we've just eliminated the barrier of location. We just need to make sure that the technology is in alignment, which is something we've been working on. We've asked for federal funding to support this.
And that works for certain kinds of programs.
That does.
That work really good for you.
Yeah, and our tablets are enabled with classrooms online, so that's very much within our wheelhouse already. The other piece is I think we want to be intentional about how we add additional educational opportunities throughout the state. So we're not duplicating effort, but we're creating kind of like, we have what I would call the mothership, which is the state prisons, and then we have sort of satellite areas across the state that offer different specialized opportunities, and then people can purposely move to get those opportunities met based on their own needs, kind of their desires and drives, proclivities. But I think that we got to do both of those things, in my opinion.
All right, we're gonna keep
Yeah,
that.
if I could very briefly.
Linda, we're gonna come to you next. We have one more comment here, and then if you want to unmute, we'll come to you next.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll be quick. I'd like to bring that together with what Representative Ballard addressed, and that is the importance of transformative education. So much of what she said was so powerful. I also do not want us to lose track of the fact that, you know, there are very few bachelor's degrees that someone can go get right now at Brigham Young University or at the University of Utah and go lead immediately to some high-paying job in the current market. I personally, in the work that we do at Salt Lake Community College and awarding associate's degrees, I see it a little bit differently. I feel like, yeah, if we can get as many people as possible with a technical degree to do something very practical where they're bringing in money, which is what, for example, Davis Tech is doing, and we offer them a degree perhaps in communications or something along those lines. It's not that the associate's degree or the later bachelor's degree immediately leads to higher income. What I see happening with that is that it changes the way they see themselves in the society in which they interact. It's one thing to get a job because you have the technical skills. It's another to be able to keep it because you can interact with people who see the world differently politically, religiously, and socially than you do. And you were raised in a white supremacist background, which is literally what the demographic that we're talking about they're facing. So I just don't want us to lose track and become overly concerned about the fact that this degree leads to this job or this. That is important, of course, but there is this other side to it in higher ed.
Linda, let's come to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that Healthy Relationships Utah with Utah State University is currently in every single jail, with the exception of one, and that's the one where Sam is at. But our program is run by the doctor who's over the extensions for all of the state of Utah. And we're in both prisons. We've been teaching this way for 15 years. We teach a course called the Inside Out Dad and another course called Smart Steps, which we just implemented in the past year on the women's side. And we have learned a lot of lessons about, working as a team. We meet together as a team and we work with every facility and every different, type of rules and restrictions and things like that, and red tape per facility as we've gone throughout the course of teaching this way. And we track down our students. When a student moves, we will track them down. We find them through the UDC site, or the inmates will tell us where they went, which they're not supposed to know, but they always do. And we find them and have them complete the course. So we also are doing a virtual section of our classes on the prison, right at the prison, where we're conducting surveys. We're federally funded. And so our grants are federally funded, but we're just expanding with Health and Human Services to offer more evidence-based parenting courses and things like that. So all that to say is that I think maybe there's some sort of subcommittee that could be created where we could, maybe discuss and share some information about lessons learned and how can we collaborate through this process. One of the things I see with the tablets is these, people haven't had technology in their hands for a very long time. So we can give them tablets, but having them learn how to use them has been a barrier in some of the instances. So things like that.
I appreciate that, Linda. And I've got some action items that I'm going to talk about just as I've been listening. But I'm going to go to Andy first, and then we are going to hear about, I know Representative Ballard wants to talk about some possible legislation, but I've been taking notes of some action items, and I think, Linda, you hit some of them, but I'm going to narrow them down. You guys, you're stuck with me on this committee, so I'm going to give Jared some assignments for our next meeting, and I'm going to be zooming in, so I got to have like something in writing that I can look at. So no pressure. Andy, jump in.
Great, thanks so much. Very much I've appreciated the conversation and just wanted to echo something that David said and that I completely agree with about kind of the role of bachelor's degrees, not necessarily having to translate one for one on jobs. At least that's not how usually we look at it from a higher ed viewpoint, in that especially in the carceral setting, how many of the folks who are going through and getting technical degrees may have challenges getting a job due to their records. And so instead, it may make more sense for them to start a small business of their own, that they could really, they could enhance their opportunity to start their small businesses or to be successful in society with a bachelor's degree, whether it's communication, history, liberal arts, a degree in liberal arts, where they can, to kind of David's point, better interact with folks on the outside, better understand the world in which they find themselves, to kind of deprogram, depending from their backgrounds, some of the things that landed them in prison. And so just to say that I think that the BA degree pathway that we're hoping to develop from the University of Utah is kind of to do some of those larger holistic changes as opposed to kind of one-off that this degree is going to lead into this high-paying job immediately after completion.
I appreciate that more than you think, Andy. I am, as your, I guess, co-chair, I think we get away from liberal arts way too much. I think we do. No offense, I know you came from the technical world, but I think
I got a liberal arts
there's an
degree.
amount of confidence that people get just understanding the world, understanding the French Revolution. As weird as that sounds, it creates confidence in people in a different way. I've got some action items, and I'm hoping we get some support for some of these items. And I'm going to throw out some things that I think would be it's certainly helpful for me, and it sounds like a lot of this is already created. I liked the word. I use central system. You use like central command. I think
It was the mothership, very
Mothership.
technical.
Okay, so first item that I would like to see in our next meeting, and I'm just gonna give some of these to you, Jared, and I'm hoping with corrections we can get this. I think an overall menu of what's going on today. It sounds like you've already got that report. I will read it if you send it to me. I think it'd be helpful to see what all the institutions are doing in the prison system and in the jail. So, I mean, my items number one is there. Item number two, I think some of this information is already before me. Jail solutions, what's happening in the jail today. I like the fact that you've got a program with Utah State and Cache County. I like the fact that there's a building program in Uinta Basin. I think it'd be helpful to see as we collaborate and see what everybody is doing. Item number three, I am concerned when I hear Sam talk about budget, the state should be funding this. I totally agree with Sam. I know we're gonna have a broader budget discussion after USHE meets. USHE has a new board. For those of you that, I mean, you guys have been watching, legislature came in, we said instead of having this great big board, we narrowed it down. Governor is my brother-in-law. I wouldn't have changed the entire board. I would have left some of the people on, but we have brand new people entirely, and there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. So the other action item is I'd like to see feasibility on tablets. I want to know which institutions are using them. Obviously, Salt Lake Community College is using them. That's what I've heard. I'd be curious to see what that looks like. One of the things that we've done in higher ed is we've talked about shared services, and we've gone out of our way to say we want collaboration among the institutions, okay? And we've been really, really clear. We've run legislation, we've done funding on collaboration. I really want to see what that collaboration looks like. I want to see what, up at Cache County, what your contract looks like versus prison, if there's a way to have broader participation there. And then I go to central command. I think you're exactly right. I think we got to have, what did you call it? Command station, spaceship,
Mothership.
the mothership. I think you've got to have a way to bring it all together. And obviously, I think that should be run with USHE and corrections together. But I think there's got to be great collaboration. But let's talk about your legislation. Are those any objection to some of those action items? Does that make sense? And does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I mean, mothership has been after its class.
We absolutely can respond to all of those curiosities, and we can bring it back some information and put it in
And I will read
paper
it.
form.
I will read. My other request is Representative Ballard and I want to be invited. You're probably invited because you've been doing this longer than I have. We want to be invited to graduation. My son starts home MTC that day. No promises I can make it.
I'll be out of town.
But I kind of want to go see graduation.
Well, what time does he, is your?
He just starts that day. He'll be like a missionary the night before, and he'll just get on, however they do it. So I think I can probably ditch out.
Well, rumor has it that legislators get free access to the prison.
Anytime.
Yeah,
But
your
I don't
badge
want
works.
I don't want to go to the graduation.
Oh my
I would love to have you
I
there.
want to
It's
like
going
to
to
be
be
a
a
really
really amazing.
Yeah.
When is yours, Dan?
September.
I'll have to have it.
September.
Mine comes with lunch, I'm just saying.
September.
Mid-September, but I'm happy to schedule
Mid-September, Stan, where are we at mid-September?
Sydney, Australia.
Can we zoom in?
This is his running buddy, by the way. These two.
I like on the September 20th, I'm gonna zoom into this meeting because Stan, well, you're gonna be in New Zealand by then. I'm still gonna be in Sydney. So, okay. Representative Ballard, tell me about potential legislation. You are on the agenda.
Yeah, so, Jared's gonna pull it up. This is where the fourth substitute where we ended up, this last session, we ended up taking out the requirement for every inmate for a tablet because the funding for those tablets was just way too much money. And it couldn't get that support.
How much was it? I'm curious.
19 million, something like that, but that was majority of that, I think, was the tablets. And it also was money for the student access advisors, which was more like, I don't know. It should say on there, you should be able to put the fiscal number.
It's on like 380. Okay, let's just wrap it up.
So, this, if we look at just the terms that are on here,
Not the summary.
yeah, just the summary, directs this council to facilitate the education, which and also for county jails, which is what we've talked about today. Removes a provision requiring the inmate to pay 50% of the tuition at the time of the enrollment, and gives, the next one is to give them residency for tuition purposes, both while they're incarcerated and for a year after they get out, because that's a big gap right now in the funding. Requires the Department of Corrections to publish a notice informing an individual depositing money. That's a different issue, but it works fine under this. Will you go to the third substitute? Let me see what else is on there.
Okay.
There were a couple of other things we ended up taking out.
We just have progressively smaller fiscal notes.
I know, I don't see, so go to the second, because there's not a third. I don't know what happened to the third, but do the second one. There you go. And that's being displayed. So, yeah, so maybe zoom in a little bit for us. Okay, let's see. Oh, this was the other reason, the student success advisors. So this is really providing this so that they are going to, I see them being an expert at helping them apply for scholarships and Pell Grants, doing all that up front first, instead of them paying 50% up first. And then also helping them to know what classes and courses are available for what they're interested in, what we can offer, and at whatever point that they would be ready for that during their incarceration. And go down a little bit. Go down a little bit. Let's see what's on 26 and below.
Which one?
So scroll down a little bit further. Okay, so provide assistance to inmates participating, and then provide a tablet. So that's kind of where we were. I'd love any other recommendations that you see that we need on here. So I would say for this year, we don't need the tablet requirement. Everybody's doing it and working on that. But one of the other things we had in here was for the ability to have access with the internet and with technology, because right now, many, if not most of the inmates are handwriting papers and don't have access to a computer or a keyboard. I don't know if some of the tablets might be able to have an attachment for a keyboard. That would make a huge difference for them to develop their computer skills, develop their typing skills, even take a typing course, you know, from their tablet if they've never been typing before. So go back one more time now to the first substitute, and we'll see what's on that. I think we ended up, I keep finding all these little things as we're going backwards here.
Okay.
Is that the original?
Original.
Yeah.
Let's go to the original.
Okay, see what else is on there, if there's anything else.
I think the only difference between the first and second was the jails, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. So I think that's what it is, but I would like to be able to help facilitate. So what are your thoughts with the access to the technology if they're in classes, or the that would be, you know, internet if it was needed, or the keyboards if they need to write things. I know there's a challenge with that, but you've got a new director. What kind of vision do you have? And that could be just making sure they have access to be able to download and upload information. It doesn't always have to be real time, but what are your thoughts with that?
I'm not sure what part of that would be appropriate in legislation or just what part would be appropriate in collaboration with our education partners. Currently, I can speak with just Salt Lake Community College. Salt Lake Community College is in possession of a number of secure books, so laptops specifically made to be used in a correctional setting that can be used to type and save papers and things like that. Those are owned by Salt Lake Community College that they've received permission to bring into corrections. So on that end, that's just done as a collaboration of them requesting a service or a resource for their students, and then corrections on our end saying, yes, we support that resource and service brought in, and then we just come up with a security plan to do that. So if the question is how could we fund more of that, I'm not actually sure of the best way of doing that. That should be done.
So that's institution specific that you're talking about there. It's not sort of the general populace.
Correct.
Yeah, and the way to do that is usually she's gonna have a budget discussion, and they're gonna come up. I mean, the whole budget process is fascinating, and technically they're supposed to run through the governor's office and work up through that process. But that's something that I'm sure Yushi and Jared, if we could start that discussion. Eventually, that'll end up in front of us in the legislature. Obviously, Representative Ballard or I, we can simply say, you know what, we appreciate Yushi's recommendations, but we're going to open up our own appropriation request to fund it. I mean, the best way to do that would be to follow the executive branch process, see where it goes, see where it's prioritized. And obviously that doesn't take legislation. You can do it through legislation with a fiscal law, but obviously you can go through that process, no problem. And if we don't like where we get through the governor's budget, we just do it.
I think one of the challenges is at being available. I mean, if they can only access a computer when they're in school, then their downtime, they can't do classes, they can't do homework, they can't write a paper. David, what have you seen as that being an issue with actually needing access to that other than just being in your class?
We are, first of all, I need to acknowledge Brian's efforts specifically in helping us get those laptops in. So we have been able to run successfully a computer science course for the women. We have brought them into the men, and yet it's difficult for us still to get them to be able to use that and type papers on it and things like that because of the roadblocks that corrections faces, and there are many of them, including how difficult it is with providing the proper security for something like that. The housing units in the new prison are set up so that they're open, and if you walk through them, they're very loud and they echo, and there's a lot going on. And so going back to the housing units to study in that type of environment and work is very difficult, if not impossible. We've had students that are established students that have to drop their statistics class, for example, because they just couldn't concentrate on the housing unit blocks. We have talked about this before as a challenge, and we're hopeful that as we move forward that, and I appreciate what Brian said, we talked about legislation that would perhaps move this forward, but there are so many different problems and nuances and challenges with housing that many of which I wasn't entirely aware of. We talked about that in the last session. Nonetheless, it is my understanding that we're starting to see that happen with Davis Tech in the Green facility, and that we are very optimistic and hopeful that we will be able to coordinate our efforts with Brian specifically and the deputy wardens who are working with us so that we can have some established housing units specifically for education. They are essential, particularly in that new prison environment because of the structure of the housing units. If we're going to have success long-term in providing technology access, including bringing laptops and things like that for people to use on the housing units, it's going to have to be in an environment that is conducive for education, and that doesn't exist right now.
So that was actually in the first version of this bill, was to require some type of educational housing. I could see that as a great incentive for people to want to be in a quieter environment and more learning environment. On the other hand, when I asked what time all the tablets are returned, it was 8 p.m. at night, but they don't go to bed until, so they have another 2 hours to watch a movie, to watch do some of their class or listen to a TED Talk or whatever. And the response that Shalene gave me was, oh, well, maybe we could just hire one of the inmates of that to gather them at 9:30. I mean, that would be pretty easy. And I'm like, then, that's an example of making use of letting them use their time better and have a quieter opportunity in their cells. And but that would facilitate more education opportunities too. If there were things that were part of the class that they could download and listen to or watch, I think they would love that, and I think it would help the behavior tremendously if that's an option. Yeah.
I just want to update that we are revising our policy, so the 8 p.m. was in policy, so we had to change the policy though, so that prison operations would allow us to have the tablets. We're looking not just at a later return in time, but for some housing units, maybe overnight, right? Because we realize we're excluding the very people that were most, like the people that go to work all day or that are in educational programs often have least access to the tablets. So we want to make sure that we're not disincentivizing the good behavior, right? So we are amending the policy and working through that. We have executive support and approval for that. The other piece is we followed the building block request pathway last year. So we asked for funding for technology expansion. The governor was supportive of that. So
Did we
we
give
will
it
try
to
it
you?
again. No, we didn't get it.
Did you run it through which committee?
I think there was a lot of funding that didn't get given to.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I personally struggled last year. I was
Let's
like, it was a rough year, but.
Let's be creative though,
We
in a
did.
future session, let's find a way to run it through her committee, through Representative Bowers, run it through higher ed. Unless did you go through higher ed? Find a way to run it through higher ed.
We can't take bills.
No, but her building block request,
But the higher ed.
RFA, is that what you're talking about?
If it's a building block request for corrections, it's directly tied to higher ed, you can take that, you just have to request it.
I think that
Just
one
tell
of the,
Jonathan Ball that you're taking it.
okay, one of the challenges we have is the tablets are not used just for education. They use that for financial accounting and their commissary and communicating with doctors and,
They're
all that
highly
stuff.
integrated now. They're primarily an educational tool. So I want to make sure that to keep education and its primacy on the tablets, but also like people are doing ICRs, which are requests for medical attention. They're communicating with all kinds of staff, from our chaplains to our therapists across the tablets, right? So they're becoming an increasingly powerful tool. And I just want to add, all of these people are going to be released in a highly technological society. So to deprive them of any technology while they're incarcerated and then hope they're going to be fine is sort of like putting your heads in the sand. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna ask another question. As you look at your peers out there in the world, housing sounds like an issue. Obviously, we built a new prison, and maybe we weren't as good as we should have been addressing some of these concerns as we built it. Just email me if you've got good examples where states and prisons are doing it right. I'm curious to see what it's supposed to look like. If there's a good model out there somewhere in the world, I'm just curious.
Like somebody brought that.
Stand up, find a marathon, and we'll run it.
You got an idea?
Walk through the prison and look at it.
Dr. Mitchell has a lot of experience.
I've worked in over 50 different prisons and probably 2 dozen jails and a number of juvenile detention centers as a director in New York for 6 years. So if you need that data, I can give it to you.
I'd be curious to see what it's supposed to
Minnesota, Texas, Colorado, California, I've been into, so all those states I've worked in. When it comes to jail,
I'd like to see like the good ones, like, okay, what like best practices, what are they doing that we're not? Because it'd be curious, and I think we probably do a lot of things right, but.
yeah,
And I think there was the reason that we were not able to institute housing specifically for education wasn't because we didn't desire to do so. There was always that drive and we see the value of that. It's that we are 400 officers short at our new facility, which every time we open a new portion, it creates more posts. for
Yeah,
us
I mean, and the
and
whole
more
prison
overtime.
building was very political, it was hard to
Yeah.
finish. I mean, I was there through the whole thing.
Yeah.
There was a fight to privatize it right from the start
And I'd also like to add, if there are courses that these institutions are offering that could count towards other programming, let them help teach, let the inmates have the option of completing it or getting credit for it, right? But look and see what is in your programming, and like the healthy relationships, I think that's a great idea where they can teach it for you. Instead of doing some, a different regimen that you're used to doing. I think there's a lot of value in, offering different timeframes of therapy. For example, if I was in for drugs, I would want to have something for drug, programming right as I get in, because that's why I was there. And if I wanted something in between, but and of course something before getting out, but I think those timeframes can be changed and credit for things as we're doing this, because it's also required now that all the inmates leave with like a resume and Google information. So teaching all of them maybe at their very first introduction to technology of actually writing a resume, and before they leave, make sure it's updated with the courses that they've had and so forth, that they have those documents regardless of when they're released. I just think that's a really important part of the learning that they have, and also empowering them for when they get out. So.
Laurie, Stephanie Patton's comment on the chat, right? Stephanie is with USBE Adult Ed. Student success advisors would be even more powerful if they were also coordinating with adult ed programs as well, to provide a more holistic view of education for students who are incarcerated.
So would that need to come
Another
from
good
higher ed, or would that come from a different
Well,
pot?
you
How
know,
would that
like
be
any
coordinated?
good higher ed advisor worth their salt, they're gonna be plugged in with what's going on.
Juvenile detention centers here, I'm personally in doing workshops twice a week. We have kids in the juvenile detention center working with Brett, Lisa, the Salt Lake Valley. There's 18 to 25-year-olds that have GEDs or high school diplomas. They're looking at paint dry because Utah Tech is the individual institution that's supposed to be providing education. Every single institution when it comes to juvenile detention centers. So that's another element that we can have at this council. 18 to 25-year-olds is that same population of adults.
Yeah, they're in higher ed.
They're in higher ed. They're waiting for education. And before COVID, Salt Lake Community College, and during COVID, Salt Lake Community College was providing online access via Canvas. And Canvas is a software that provides secure inside incarcerated locations as well, so jpay.com as well.
So that's where I think we need to know, what can you offer, what do you want to offer? I think we need to get this settled, and maybe the the GED or high school or other things can be added, but I think we need to get this solid, because this is where your expertise are, and then we can work more on the ways that you see that we could collaborate with the other entities. But I think we have an urgency right now. And now that Senator McHale's back, I just want to say, Andrea, I praise you like all the time, because you came in and you have changed so much. You have really helped to eliminate a lot of the barriers. And I just want to say thank you. It's great to work with you. And we keep going like this, but it's like that's where we keep getting the ideas, right, of where we can go. And you are very visionary, actually. And your comment a few minutes ago of how to have the mothership of coordinating those things, you know how it works. And so that's where this is really working together to get it accomplished.
Yes, it's a good fight. It's worth getting in
Yes.
for, and everyone join us.
So the K-12 student advisement, I don't know if Stephanie wants to chime in on that.
Stephanie, chime in. We got your comment. I can see it.
I mean, is there a broader need that's specific to the adult ed piece?
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, like, if you're gonna have student success advisors, right? That conversation could start from the very beginning, right? They come in, they have their cap, they're talking about like, what is your educational trajectory, right? And that includes like, oh, we see you don't have skills, really knowledge and skills to succeed at Davis Tech or Salt Lake Community College or UPEP or whatever, right? Then we're gonna like point you to adult education because it's part of your educational pathway, right? To get to the point where you're able to access those programs. But I think if you're just saying like, we're only going to talk about higher education with these are higher education student success, you're missing that other piece that's actually building them towards higher education, right? So like just including it, yeah, in a holistic like pathway, right? And adult education needs to be part of that, because what we do know, for instance, at the height of our program down in Central Utah Academy, we're not there right now, right? It's been considerably lessened in the last couple of years, but it was over 1,000 students, right? And why was it over 1,000 students? Because they were looking at the academic knowledge and skills of all the students, or of all the individuals who are housed there, and saying like, there's 1,000 students who are in need of building academic knowledge and skills. Now imagine that that's similar, right, in the Salt Lake prison as well. Again, we're at that height, so just making sure that we're keeping that pathway.
So with those student advisors, do you need this to be a different student advisor that does the high school and component, so that they could still have them? I just don't know if the higher ed student success advisors for all that's involved for the grants and the Pell Grants and the scholarships and the classes and where they are.
The ones that are ready for higher ed.
Yeah. I think having student success advisors for, 9 through 12 or whatever is great, but I see them having a different specialty and coming from the adult, I don't know, maybe I'm asking you, Jared, if they should be the same advisor that could help anybody, or if we kind of need to have different advisors that are housed in different places because of their specialty.
Stephanie was shaking her head, so I agree with Stephanie.
No, I think it's the same conversation. You're starting the conversation before they're in adult education, right? Like, how do you get to a higher ed if you have low skills and you can't test in, and you know what I mean? Like, adult education has to be part of that. So if you're just starting the conversation as they come in and saying like, hey, if you want to get to higher ed, your pathway, not for everyone, but some people's pathway will cross through adult education. They just need to be aware and be part of the conversation as appropriate.
And Andrea, you do evaluation when they first come in of where their education is, right?
We do.
Yeah.
We do testing and receiving orientation to determine what their needs are. And we do all kinds of evaluations. So we're doing risk assessment, right? So we're making sure that we're addressing their core chromiogenic risk factors. And then we're also testing for literacy and things like that.
But so what do you feel like you need for those that are still needing to get those skills, whether they have a high school diploma or not, but still needing that? Is that something that you feel confident in evaluating that and then getting them to the right classes, or do you feel like you need a different success academic advisor to do that?
I'll let you think.
I guess it depends on what area, what direction we're pushing towards, and what skill we're talking about. If we're talking about basic literacy and math intervention at that level, I would say there's still some need for resources there to be able to meet the needs of the population, which is fairly high. If we're talking, I can speak, Davis Tech right now partners with our high school partner in Salt Lake to provide some literacy and math intervention. But that's meeting a pretty small portion of the population. That's only capturing the population of people who have applied for Davis Tech, and then we found out, oh, you don't read or you do math very well. So
what's remediation?
Yeah, it's very small. I would say there's a large portion of our population who also need that intervention, who we have identified but don't have the current resources to be able to provide that intervention.
And And I would piggyback on that and share that Dr. Bradbury and I went through last fall, all of our students, I mentioned we had over 200 at that point. All but 5 of them earned their high school degree inside the prison. That 5 of them earned in one of the high schools here in the state. Every one of our students almost goes through the high school system and the prison system. So we're talking about a very challenging situation because, going through the high school program that way, and they do a remarkable job, and yet still, a lot of people there that struggle with basic literacy issues. And it's one of the reasons why I feel Salt Lake Community College is uniquely situated to help with that, because that is what this college does. It goes in and helps those that, for whatever reason, we're struggling with.
And I think part of why I want a menu of who's doing what, my gut and my impression is that's a role Salt Lake Community College should be playing in a probably bigger way across the state. Understanding again that Utah State is a land grant, and I don't know how you say this without being offensive to any institution. I don't know that every institution should be in this arena, because I think we only have so many resources, and we need to find a way to use those resources in a way that is narrow to focus, so it's super efficient and effective. And if that offends one institution or another, I mean, so be it. But my God, as I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to read it recently. It's going to be an amazing thing to read. But my gut says we really need to narrow it and focus it. One of my frustrations in public ed, and I'm going to just vent, and we're having a good candid discussion. We have all of these options. In my Neva school district, we have 11 different options for students. And sometimes I think we create too many options instead of good options. I'd rather have 5 really good programs than 11 really bad ones. And I think as we put this together, I hope we can. You're never going to have a perfect program for every student, and I don't think, logistically, with what you're telling me, I don't know how you do that. But if we can narrow it down to what we do really, really well and have a bigger impact, to me, I think that should be the focus. And it sounds like there's a lot of things happening out there. I guess the question is, how do we narrow that to make sure we're having a big impact? And the inmates are going to be different than those folks in the county jails. They just are logistically. But
if I could, I'm going to add 2 more things. One of them is at the time of evaluation, it should be determined if they are hireable to be employed as a TA, as a mentor. Most of the prisons and some of the jails need more jobs, and that mentorship gives them a lot of self-confidence and relationships, and I'd like to provide more opportunities for that. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is, how can we beef up the technology readiness before starting your coursework, right? What can be done for everybody, and what are the different levels that they would be capable of? Are some of those already on the tablets that are specific courses that the tablet can do a self-teaching thing? What needs to be in person, what doesn't? I think the technology piece is something, I think I had originally put it in the legislation, but within the first 6 months, that was my idea, is that they should have some kind of computer literacy. They're going to have to order commissary or connect with their doctor. I mean, what in the first 6 months do they need to do? And is that something, I love it if you do all this without me putting anything in legislation, right? But we've kind of learned it helps to have that direction. What are your thoughts about that? Because we kind of brought it up last time, Andrea.
So computer literacy is easily done via the tablets already. That's already, we just purchased EBSCO Academic Elite and also their business profile, which gives them access to all kinds of tools. Whether they use them or if they have anyone that points them to them is the next level question, right? So I think we're doing a good job of onboarding new opportunities. And we just had to do some internal resourcing within the programming division to work out how we could hire additional tablet technician support. So we're just about to post 2 more jobs for our tablet technicians, so we can have one at each site, right? And then it's just saying, there's the resource there, push them in the right direction. So maybe the student success advisors will be able to help with that, you know, if they're fully aware of what the opportunities are. And like to Stephanie Patton's point, they're gonna trip over the challenge and then they're gonna redirect that person, right? They're gonna find out, oh, they really aren't higher education ready, but we know where to point them to. And Stephanie's team will be there to fill in the gap there. So I do think it's gonna work. Even if we just focus on higher ed, I think they're gonna realize, here's a barrier, there's where you need to go, let's fill it.
I think the last thing that I'm thinking of is for those of you who've been on here, I'm always about, it's helpful to have things in writing, but it's also helpful to know what the barriers are. Put out your wish list. We can take some off, we can put some on, but we need to gather everybody's wish list and then look at it and see what we can work together to accomplish and things that need to be considered at a different time. Yeah.
Really quickly, before the time is up, working with Utah Reintegration Program, which Utah Reintegration Program. And I started 2 reintegration programs, one at Hamlin Law School when I was there, and at SUNY Portland, and they're still going on. And reintegration, without reintegration, you most likely at Temple University, they've all done research, 273 research programs I've looked at reintegration, and many of them have noted prison education without a reintegration program is not successful, not complete and holistic. So we're looking at what is reintegration. It looks at a cell phone. It looks at hygiene. It looks at how do you socialize. So you have a PhD, but if you don't know how to resolve a conflict with your peer, you're never going to get a job. You might have the super job readiness and take a 12-week program on job readiness, go to Harvard with an MBA, but if you don't know how to put on deodorant, you got yourself a problem, or how to tie a tie. So Utah Reintegration is trying to look at all these 273 reintegration programs that are going on in the United States and do something very successful in a collaborative way. And we've invited a number of jails, juvenile detention centers, et cetera, to be on the steering committee, including Ryan. But just wanted to kind of put that out there and say, rather than giving them a whole website of different resources when they get out of jail, juvenile detention centers and prisons in Utah, give them one, UtahReintegrationProgram.org. And we can all be involved in a collaborative way, not chasing the grants. There's not too much effort. Everybody needs to be on all hands on deck when they come out, so we can decrease recidivism. Let them finish education. Rather than getting 80% done in an education program. And then what does that do? We know statistically what that does in psychology. It doesn't make them happy. It actually makes them depressed. And so that's what.
What are we doing with that today? Pretend like I don't know.
Okay.
Just hypothetically, what are we doing with that today with reintegration?
Reintegration.
So, I mean, we do have reentry programs that we do. They're largely about making sure that individuals have the appropriate documentation to successfully navigate the system. Hopefully, when we're doing our work well, we're doing the risk reduction work. That's the most important piece, right? So they're getting substance use treatment, medically assisted treatment, so they're receiving some supportive help along the way. We are now in a place where we're like taking that next step. And it's not UDC doing it, but we're partnering with community partners to figure out what resources already exist in the community. How do we tap into those resources? Housing is huge, right? We hear it over and over again. When people get released, having a secure, safe place to live is golden and often maybe something we all take for granted in our own comfortable homes. So that's a big challenge. We've been trying to work with Department of Workforce Services to see if we can get a person from their department to live in one of our facilities and try to, like, we really want to integrate those, because they're going to come to you later and it would be great to catch them up.
I just saw you volunteer.
No, I don't, and this is not to point fingers, it's just the communication is huge, the challenges are.
I'm not doing it.
Yeah, because we understand that having a job before you leave is better than a job you have to find after you leave. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing. Nothing's worked out, ironed out perfectly. Each individual has their own strengths and challenges. And so it really is an individualized approach. I think as we take on the Women and Infants program, that's gonna be a good catalyst for figuring this out. It's a small population. We really want those moms and babies to land on their feet and do well. So it's gonna be a pilot program for us to sort of figure out what's possible.
So that starts while they're incarcerated, but does some of that follow them while they're on parole or?
And I think what Dr. Michela is helping us to recognize, helping me specifically recognize, is that that's one piece of the reintegration puzzle. And there are so many other components to it, and it's not, we can't put everything on the Department of Corrections. Everyone will not be successful. And so he is hoping that we can create this entity that will all allow the different organizations to work
Institution needs to be involved and roll off through.
So this last legislative year, not in 2022, we passed legislation for the community, let's see, Justice Council, I think it was. So that is the place, and working with Chief Ross with CCJJ to get that integrated. It sounds like you're probably doing that. That's really good. But that's my beef that I have with parole, is they get parole and they miss out on the preparation, right? The math to me doesn't make any sense of how parole works. I'm working on that with CCJJ and with Sentencing Commission right now, because it's in my mind, it's a huge problem. They have such little time. And right now, all the inmates are gearing towards, how can I appease the board instead of how can I prepare to reintegrate into society? And those are two different questions.
I have systems impacted people that want to go to the Wednesday evening support group. I have to drive to the 25th, what's it, the Orange Street halfway house, the 25th Street halfway house, contact, phone call the parole officers for these people, because they have to be in the halfway house at 6 p.m. Our meetings are 5:30 to 6:30. So it's like, are you doing them a service or disservice? And then they can't bring in the halfway houses any snacks, and they can't bring any technology. So they can't bring a cell phone or a laptop into a number of these halfway houses. So we're like working with them on how to, so we're just waiting for them to come out the door because they can't get a text. So
that may be something, is you're talking about a class or a course to prepare for reintegration. How can you help? So corrections isn't trying to do everything, but a course that they could take before re-entering that helps them prepare for that. I think that is a big deal. Again, easing the need for your staff to try to teach. Let's utilize the experts in what they can help for you and for those returning.
Yes, we welcome it.
Okay, I'm gonna find a way to wrap up. We're close to 2 hours. My job is to keep us on pace today. I want you to reach out to myself and Representative Ballard with ways you think would make this council more and more efficient and more collaborative. Obviously, I gave out some action items that I want to see as I dig in. I will read it. I will probably come to graduation if you guys invite me. I think that'd be fascinating.
There is an open invite to all.
But I want to do it like it's going to be at the prison, right?
At the prison from 9 to 11. It's right by the airport. You can do both.
Okay, somebody's have to remind me. Somebody's have to send me something.
I leave on the 9th, so I can't come on the 10th.
The other thing is let's
they have
reach out to both of us if there's things that we're overlooking. I mean, I'm new, but I'm also optimistic with what I see here. I think we're going into a new session. I think there's some things that we can do as long as we're collaborative. So I'm going to take a final motion. I'm just going to do that. We're going to talk offline at this point because I like to be on time. So Daniel, thank you, David. Thank you for your motion to adjourn. It's not debatable. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll rule that passage. Okay.
So
Sheriff, before you go, I want to corner you on the way out.
Sure.
But good grief.
it's exciting to see what's changed since you've
going
taken the
fast.
helm. I would
We are
say,
living
since you've
fast.
taken the helm,